Hello and welcome to another Excel at the Office video. My name's Adrian. I run the website and support materials at eato.blog, eato.blog, and today I'm going to talk to you about some 5 great ways to deliver a presentation. I've called it 5 practices for perfect presentations. Some nice alliteration there I'd recommend using in your titles sometimes. I've probably overdone it. But generally, this is how most people want to deliver a good presentation, but often they don't know how. And so I've put together in this slide deck, which I'll put on my website as well, eato.blog, the template, how you can just brush up your presentations. You might not be as perfect as Steve Jobs, for example, but who'd want to be him anyway? He's now dead. But while he was alive, he was producing fantastic things and inspiring loads of people. There's some, including me, and there's some quotes from him that I like, one of which I think is from him about presentations is that every minute of presentation takes 1 hour of preparation. So that kind of gives you an overview as to how long you need to spend to prepare. That includes designing, practice, and putting your content together and all that. So let's get into it. I've created this and I'm using this in PowerPoint for Mac, but it's pretty much the same for Windows. I'm just going to go into presentation mode. So as you may have noticed, I'm not the perfect person to give presentations. I don't give them perfectly, but I've got some design skills and I've got some knowledge that hopefully you'll find useful as I share it. So first things first, keep your design simple. So a simple, sleek design. And you'll notice I've got congruence here with the title slide. So as I go from the title to the main slide, the designs are congruent throughout. You might like to draw it on paper first if you before diving into PowerPoint, just so that you're not fighting with how to insert shapes and all that kind of stuff before you use your creative mind to plan it all out. But generally I like to keep things simple, and that's what I've done on several other templates I share on eato.blog. So oftentimes so that's the congruence. I'm not keen on the Microsoft Office templates. You can download a whole bunch of templates from the Microsoft Office website. They're also presented to you when you start a new PowerPoint or any other Office app. I hate them really because they really restrict what you do. You can choose the color schemes, but once you've chosen it, you're restricted in what text you can use, the formatting. You can't really easily move things around without messing everything up. So I like to start from scratch and just keep it simple. The shapes and colors are basically what you're going to use. So for example, for this design of this slide deck, I've used because it's 5 things, I've used a theme of 5 pentagons around this circle shape and just lines and text. So it's very very simple, and then that helps you to focus your attention on the content. It's the content that's important in presentations. People haven't come here to experience your PowerPoint skills. It's all about what you're delivering. So that's why it's important to focus on the content. And you can use the stock images on the Microsoft insert function to help if you prefer. That's one thing that Microsoft are good at, other than the software of course, but is the stock images that you have available to your use. Make sure you lower the file size when you do them by compressing the image once it's in, otherwise your file size can get a bit out of hand when you're sharing it. So yeah, next on the next one I've given an alternative title slide using a stock image that I think is another way to show how you can just present things nicely. So in this case, I searched for things with 5 in it, and I quite like these 5 coloured chairs. So yeah, you've got your options are endless between your title slide and the background and the content slides. So try it out. So the second point on these 5 points for great presentations, so accessibility is important. And that's not just about accessible for minority, diverse or disabled audiences, but generally when you're considering accessibility, what you're doing is making it more accessible for everyone. So you're thinking about a whole audience. And you may have noticed so far I'm using the biggest text possible. So that means don't have a load of waffle and writing on your slide. No one's here to hear you read off a slide. You should be just using the slides and prompts, the bullet point prompts, as prompts for yourself to then expand upon what you're going to say, like I just did there. Probably in a not great way because I'm completely ad-libbing, but I've not done the hour preparation for 1 minute presentation because I've got a day job, but hey, I hope you find this useful anyway. Black text on white background is the most readable text you can possibly have. That's because the dark contrast on a white background is helpful to read. If you're presenting a presentation to a dyslexic audience, maybe, you might choose to put black text on a light yellow, or some prefer a light green background, because that tends to somehow, I don't understand the mechanics of it, but that seems to make the text more readable to dyslexic groups. But in any case, when you're doing that, you're avoiding hard to read colour combinations, which makes it generally more inclusive to everybody. So, as I mentioned here, avoid confusing colour combinations. It's not an 80s video game you're trying to present. It just looks awful, unprofessional, and more importantly, it's hard to read, and then people are focusing on that. What the hell does that... Oh yeah, it says confusing. I was confused by that. They're focusing on that. They're not listening to what you're saying, which is bad for your presentation. So that just shows the black text on white background in contrast to that confusing colour combination, the importance of that. So yeah, as I mentioned, accessible, it's not just for neurodiverse, colourblind or other groups, it's just making it appealing to everybody. Less is more. And you'll notice between these slide transitions, they're quite subtle. It just smoothly goes from one slide to the next. In case you're interested, I've used the transition called morph between the slides, and that just nicely seems to organise things quite automatically, really. And it's subtle, as per my suggestion for the sleek and simple design. So less is more. So don't overload your slides. So I've mentioned before in terms of that goes hand in hand with bigger text size. Nobody wants to read a slide of text, and there's no such thing as slide rations. So don't be don't be overloading them. Your text should be sparing and minimal. As I mentioned, you're not just there to point and read off the slides. You'll be boring your audience to death. If you want to, you can make some speaker notes if you're not that confident in remembering everything. I've got some bare notes here, and sometimes I'm missing things, but you get the gist of it. But that's where it's important to practice, and I'll come to that in a moment. If you're using a load of text, you may as well have done a written report in Word, for example, using my excelattheoffice.com simple Word document template. So you are presenting, you're not writing. So just use text to help remind you what to say. And then, as with the designs, coming back to the design things, don't have so fanfare-y, distracting designs. Nobody cares about that. There's no need for it. People will forget what you've got to say. Less is more. So you'll notice this slide is very simple. There's that fairly large space taken up by a header. I've created a big space in the middle for what you want to present, whether that's images and or text, and then just a small footer in color coordination with the header of the slide. So I like this one just because I often see people, they've just found out how to insert animations, not just entrance or exit effects, but all the movement and pathways effects in between. All of that, if it is just completely horrendous and will distract your audience. So just keep it subtle and dynamic. You'll see how these are coming in, just a simple, subtle movement. The pinwheel, for example, is awful, and you're not you're not an animator. You're here to deliver a professional presentation to your colleagues or customers. So yeah, just keep it subtle and basic when you're selecting particular animations in terms of entrance effects on the ribbon, which I'll probably show you in another video. Yeah, the transitions, I've briefly mentioned transitions, so don't over animate the transitions because again it's just distracting. So I recommend morph is quite a nice one, or there's one that just simply turns the page, which is quite nice as well. Yeah, if in doubt, leave it out. So just coming on to the animations, don't go overboard. It just looks unprofessional and lame. One thing I'm reminded of is there's a film of, it was around 15 years ago now, with the funny Canadian actor, I think it's Tom Green, is it? He's often featured in Trailer Park Boys as well in their recent films. But the film's called Freddy Got Fingered, which sounds a bit ominous, but I'd recommend a watch if you're just for some easy watching nonsense and humorous teenage boy humour. But his ambition is to become an animator, and as you can tell, he's a bit wacky and out there, and that's what I imagine when people put loads of over animation that just looks lame on their slides, because it distracts from the point. And if you want to figure a perspective on that, have a watch of Freddy Got Fingered. So yeah, if in doubt, I'd recommend leaving it out. So finally, the fifth point I wanted to cover is rehearse. You may have guessed I haven't done a lot of rehearsal on this. I've designed the slides and I'm just sharing it to you now. Mainly I've done it in my head. But some people, their learning style isn't, they like to verbalize it, and that helps cement the content for them. So doing it aloud can help. Ultimately, it's going to help you remember the content and deliver a better presentation, ultimately to persuade decision makers in your organization, engage your audience, and or make a sale with your sales pitch. And again, I mentioned that 1 minute presentation equals 1 hour of preparations. And when I say better engaging your audience, that's the first step of persuasion. So you're there to present your report or ideas. In effect, you're presenting yourself. So be present, not knee-deep mentally in your slide deck. So know what you should be knowing what you're going to say for each slide title, and the bullet points are just a prompt. So rehearsal will help you go through that. So finally, here's a little summary, again going back to the kind of congruent design theme throughout, where I've used the colours, 5 of the colours from the rainbow there. The accessibility is useful, and when you're doing colour text on white background, try and make sure you choose a colour. I'm kind of pushing it there with the yellow text, but at least I've chosen a kind of deeper yellow, so try and make the colour a bit darker. So less is more, and that includes avoiding over animation with things moving about and jumping about on the slides, and practice what you're preaching. So if you like this templates and presentation, you can download it when I write the associated blog for this video, with these tips written down for those that prefer to read stuff rather than watch and or listen. And I'll put it along with my other template slide decks. So I've created one called Tomorrow's Fish, which is based on a quirky slogan from Rockfish I thought was quite amusing. You'll have to have a look at that video called Tomorrow's Fish where I discuss that. But for those that like a PowerPoint template, it's quite a nice blue background or blue heading template with some bubbles in it that is quite sleek. In terms of accessibility, the next best thing for dark text on a white background is white text on a dark background. So that's where that design comes in for accessibility. And another template I've created based around a puzzle and also a kind of critical thinking lesson on this how many triangles puzzle. I did it a couple of months ago, and then I learned from my dear mum. She called me and said on ITV they had that exact same puzzle on their program called the 1% Club, which I found quite amusing. And funnily enough, the answer they had on that 1% Club is different to the answer that I share in that presentation for helping you to think differently, think outside of the box, as it were, and blow your mind, potentially. And just an example of the over animation that is really annoying and pathetic. There's the curtains parting for all my other stuff at excelattheoffice.com, or ito.blog will also get you there. So there's PowerPoint how-to videos, templates on PowerPoint, Word and Excel, and I'm building up this resource to hopefully help people excel at their office job or in their small business and brush up their skills on presentation, marketing, and just generally doing stuff on a computer better. So I hope you found this helpful. Get in touch if you want your own presentation bespoke created. I can help you out with that. And until next time, I shall see you again.